The time has come for the Quagsire PvP IV deep dive, looking at both Quagsire and Shadow Quagsire's most important stat checks and associated PvP IVs in Great League PvP in Pokemon Go. This will also be considering Aqua Tail being added to the move pool. So Aqua Tail with the Stone Edge, Mud Bomb with the Stone Edge, and Aqua Tail with the Mud Bomb. If you're curious about the Clodsire, I hope to have that video up before Sunday. Now, if you're not too familiar with the PvP IV deep dive series, or if at any point in this video you're kind of confused what I'm talking about, I highly recommend checking out my PvP IVs simplified video, link up above and in the description. Basically, get your feet wet before you dive off into the deep end here. And of course, if you want to reference any of the information covered in this video in a text-based format, or get those sweet links to the PvP IV tables that I'll be showcasing in this video, well, link down below to my article on GamePress, the Quagsire PvP IV deep dive, which, has all this information, but in a text-based format with hyperlinks to the PvP IV tables. And without further ado, let's get into the SwagTips. Here we have the 33 different recommended non-Shadow Quagsire PvP IV spreads with a bulk focus. The stat minimums on this sheet are 112 defense with 163 HP, but for the most part, the rank 1 is kind of better than all the other IV spreads here. So you got the rank 1, and then most of the other IV spreads on this list are the I don't have the rank 1, but I got this IV spreads. The 112 defense is kind of like the starting point for the Sableye 0-0 and 2-2 shield scenario. Of course, Sableye could have higher attack than the rank 1 Sableye, so having a higher defense stat will be a bit more consistent for you. The 113.66 will cover a 121.4 attack statted Sableye, so that's a pretty high attack statted Sableye that's getting charge move priority over, high bulk Swampert and Venusaurs, which is kind of like a goal for the Sableye. So yeah, you basically want the maximum amount of defense here for the maximum amount of protection. Additionally, Quagsire has a defense breakpoint against the Medicham. When it comes to like the rank 1 high stat proc kind of Medichams here, even the lowest amount of defense will keep you fortified against that breakpoint, but when it comes to the higher attack weighted Medicham slaying Medichams, like the world champion, it's Axon's Medicham, 113.66 defense will get the defense breakpoint against that one as well. If you are curious about the Mirror Slayer Medicham, by the way, link above and description to the Medicham Slayer PvP IV deep dive. When it comes to the HP stat here, the HP stat is revolving around the Water Gun Lantern 1-2 shield scenario, the Frostlass 1-2 shield scenario, the Powdered Snow Shadow Alolan Ninetales 0-1 shield scenario, and the Charjabug 1-1 shield scenario should you miss the defense breakpoint against the Charjabug. For the rank 1 Charjabug, that defense breakpoint's at 110.53, but there could be some nasty high attack weighted Charjabugs out there. This bulk level can also potentiate the Medicham 1-0 shield scenario and the Shadow Swampert 1-0 shield scenario, but it can get a little bit testy based off of, what IVs they have going on. So overall, I'd say the rank 1 is probably the best, with a honorable mention to the rank 2. That higher HP stat, the one higher HP stat with the very high defense there, can possibly flip a couple other matchups depending on the circumstance, depending on IVs. So if I had to choose between them, if I was really worried about Sableye, I'd probably go with the rank 1 if I had the choice. But if I wasn't that concerned about Sableye, I would probably show a little bit of favoritism to the rank 2 here with that one higher HP stat. As far as an attack weighted Quagsire goes, I don't think any of the higher attack weights are really worth it, but these 13 IV spreads do encompass some of the higher attack weighted Quagsire builds in an interesting way if you are interested in those benefits, but I think overall the high bulk ones are going to be much better. The whole point of this higher attack weight here, though, is that it can get a Mud Bomb breakpoint and Stone Edge breakpoint against opponents like the Gligar, Shadow Gligar, Swampert, and the Medicham, which can enable some interesting win cons against them. And then the higher defense allows you to, maintain, the Sableye and the Carbink and the Charjabug situation still. Still kind of a meme though. And then when it comes to the Aqua Tail in particular, if you do have a higher than 113.28 attack, you can get a Mud Shot breakpoint on them, which can allow you to maintain the 0-0 with Aqua Tail against Water Gun Lantern and the 2-2 with Aqua Tail against the Spark Lantern because of the extra chip damage. So yeah, if you are looking for attack weighted memes, these 13 are my recommendations for that, but for general purpose, I think I'd probably stick with the high bulk ones. When it comes to Shadow Quagsire, there are two main blends I'm looking at. There is the high bulk one, and then there is the Carbink Slaying Shadow Quagsire. As if you thought Shadow Quagsire wasn't doing a good enough job against the Carbink, right? Well, here I have the 21 recommended high bulk Shadow Quagsires, and you may notice that the stat minimums are exactly the same as the non-Shadow Quagsire. We're looking at 112.48 on the defense and 163 on the HP. So pretty tight, only 21 IV spreads here. You might not even have any of them, but if you do have them, well then that's really good, right? As with the non-Shadow Quagsire, the defense minimum is starting out for the Sableye matchup. When it comes to the Mud Bomb Shadow Quagsire, you can get the 0-0 with this defense breakpoint, and then with the Aqua Tail, you can get the 1-1 shield scenario against the Sableye. Of course, as before, the Sableye could have a higher attack stat than the rank 1 Sableye, right? So then you're going to want to push that defense stat up as high as you possibly can. Another benefit to pushing up your defense is potentiating the Frostlass 0-1 shield scenario. Frostlass has an attack breakpoint, the rank 1 does, at 113.14. But as you know from my Frostlass PvP IV deep dive, link up above in the description, having a slight attack weight is kind of a big deal for Frostlass. So pushing your defense up to the 113.66 can better help out against that. However, when it comes to some of the more optimized Frostlass, you're going to have to push your defense even further beyond what's presented here. And for that reason, I feel like if you do have a Shadow Quagsire that does have a defense stat that's beyond the 113.66, that could be worth, keeping your eye on or running some sims on, because it could avoid those higher attack weighted Frostlass there. And when it comes to Frostlass heavy metas, if you can do a 1-0 on a Frostlass, that's kind of a big deal. Now, understandably, you probably don't have any of the top 21 high bulk Shadow Quagsire, but here are 75 alternative IV spreads for Shadow Quagsire that have basically as good of bulk as the rank 1 group does, but you will probably be losing out on the Sableye matchup because you're not hitting that higher defense breakpoint here. Additionally, I have this list cut with a 109.95 attack minimum, so you can get some cheeky breakpoints while going for this lower bulk Quagsire. So with this lower defense stat, you're still able to maintain the Shadow Venusaur 1-0 shield scenario potentially, and with the higher attack stat presented here, then it makes it even more likely because you can get the charge move breakpoint on that Shadow Venusaur, making the 1-0 a little bit more consistent. This defense can also maintain the Emolga 1-2 shield scenario if you're using the Mud Bomb, and the Shadow Alolan Sandslash 1-2 shield scenario with either the Shadow Claw or Powdered Snow moveset. They do the same exact damage, so it's the same exact breakpoint here. If you are fishing for some more options, I think you could technically go down to 162 HP as well. So if you don't have any of these options, but you want to be at this kind of level, I think the 162 HP ones are perfectly acceptable. In addition to the Shadow Venusaur matchup for the higher attack weight, this higher attack weight can also enable the Noctowl 1-1 shield scenario, the Scrafty 1-2 shield scenario with Mud Bomb, and the Metacham 2-1 shield scenario off of a Mud Bomb breakpoint. And then when it comes to those higher attack weighted Carbink, you could also get the breakpoint on the Carbink. But if you want to be extra sure that you're getting that breakpoint advantage on the Carbink, well, you're going to have to turn your head to the Carbink Slayers. Here we have the 67 swag-approved Carbink Slaying Shadow Quagsire PvP IV spreads, the Carbink Bonkers, if you will. So what this does is it gives you an attack breakpoint on your Mud Shot against the Carbink. And with that attack breakpoint and Mud Bomb, you can now overcome Carbink in the 1-2 and 0-2 shield scenarios. As far as Aqua Tail, Shadow Quagsire are concerned, this would open up potential for the 1-2 shield scenario, but not the 0-2, because Aqua Tail doesn't hit as hard as the Mud Bomb does. And you might not think this is that big of a deal, because you're going to be winning that matchup anyways, but now you have the ability to just no shield a Carbink and know that you're going to come out ahead with your Shadow Quagsire, where if you're using a different, non-steel type, non-Clodsire Pokemon, you would have to spend a shield at some point in that matchup. So if you had no shields in the end game, and they had 2 shields, you'd probably lose. So I think this is a pretty interesting utility for it, especially that it's also a shadow Pokemon. So if you don't have any of the IV spreads that I highlighted before, shoot for the moon, land among the stars. Well, these stars have that interesting utility against the Carbonk. Now, the 111.89 minimum is based on the rank 1 Carbink, but without the best buddy. If you do want to be prepared for the best buddy Carbink, you will have to have higher than a 112.22 attack weight. So these ones would be able to also cover the rank 1 best buddy and the maximum defense best buddy Carbinks to bonk them most effectively. When it comes to the defense here, I used 108 as the minimum. That way you can try to maintain the Shadow, Alolan Sandslash 1-2 shield scenario. Having higher defense can open up some other matchups too, where if you have a higher than a 109 defense stat, that opens up the Shadow Venusaur 1-0 shield scenario. And when it comes to the attack weight portion of that, well, you definitely have it when it comes to this IV spread. Another thing that I should highlight here is going to come down to the bulk product, which I have to enable. If you happen to be up against a high attack weighted Carbink, as highlighted in my Carbink PvP IV deep dive, they could get charge move breakpoints on your Shadow Quagsire if it has too low of bulk and they have enough attack, where they could steal the 0-2 shield situation back from you. So if you want to be fortified against that, then you'll want to have a 177.48 bulk product or higher. So this level of bulk should protect yourself from the attack weighted Carbink that I have highlighted in my Carbink PvP IV deep dive. Of course, higher bulk product, the better. And then of course, having the 112.22 attack stat also nabs those best buddy rank 1 types as well. So this does suggest that the like this one, this one's probably one of the better ones, because then you guarantee that breakpoint, you have chance against the Venusaur, and then your overall bulk product is good. But of course, any of these super high bulk product ones that also get the breakpoint, they're all pretty dope. Now to wrap things up here, if you're wondering about which one you want to evolve with Aqua Tail and which one you're going to want to have be like your Mud Bomb Stone Edge as far as the Quagsires are concerned, I'd say for non-Shadow Quagsire, as far as like your better IV spread goes, I feel like the Mud Bomb Stone Edge will take priority over the Aqua Tailers. So your like very best looking one, I'd probably make the Mud Bomb. Your second best looking one, I'd probably go with the Aqua Tail. Similar pretty much goes for the Shadow Quagsires as well. The only caveat I'd have to say is if you have like a super good looking attack weighted one and you have only one really good bulk weighted looking one, then I'd probably make the bulk weighted one Aqua Tail, because all of the attack weighted advantages for the most part apply exclusively to Mud Bomb. So when it comes to that use case kind of scenario, if you're only making 2 Shadow Quagsires, that's how I'd split it up. But in a perfect world, you'd have your best bulk one be the Mud Bomb Stone Edge, your second best bulk one be the Aqua Tail whatever, and then your Carbonker attack weighted one being the Mud Bomb. Also, when it comes to the attack weighted Shadow Quagsires, Aqua Tail is functional there too. The Mud Bomb breakpoints are specific to Mud Bomb, so you could go Mud Bomb Aqua Tail. And then when it comes to the idea of taking on the Carbink in the 1-2 shield scenario, well, Aqua Tail will want the attack breakpoint to achieve that. So options galore. But those are my recommendations here. Of course, feel free to color outside the lines as you see fit. So that's all I got to say right now about the SwagTips and the Shadow Quagsire. If you got any questions on this content, of course, comment below. Let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this kind of content, you want to see more like it, maybe you want a Clodsire PvP IV deep dive, well, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these patron supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. The most important stat checks and breakpoints and associated PvP IVs for both the Great League and the Great League. Definitely the Great League. Another perk to the higher defense on the Quagsire